I'm gonna shimmy and play that music. Hey, beautiful humans.
Hello.
Oh my goodness. Surprise. Spontaneous episode that we decided to do. I'm so excited. I'm just so happy to see you. This has been getting me through my week. And oh my God, how have you been and what have you been up to?
Boys. What is wrong with boys?
I'm still trying to figure that out.
I have been on the Tinders and I have been talking to boys and it has not been going well.
Oh,
It's okay. But talking to boys and some girls too.
oh,
Oh.
some old ladies.
Yeah, I'm just making friends, seeing how it goes, seeing the situation.
Well, way to go. I'm proud of you for putting yourself out there. That's the biggest step, right?
Right. And I think that's a good thing, is just, seeing the dating pool out there.
Taking a dip in that pool with little Tootsie, just bloop.
Yeah. What have you been up to?
Oh, just working. It's been a busy week. We took our cat down to get radiation therapy, so that is something that we are navigating. Hopefully, I'm very optimistic that she will be okay, but I know I've been mentioning periodically on episodes the health of our kitty Phoebe, but she's doing okay. The vet down there keeps sending us photos of her. She's loving everybody. She's absorbing all the attention. And I'm just like, way to go, girl. Like way to go.
Yeah, I'm so glad that she's feeling better. Yeah, or that she's doing better, because I was kind of worried about her, that she was not going to make it.
Yeah, we were really worried about that too. We had like a few weeks there where we were having like an existential crisis over it, but like the radiologist seems very optimistic about the treatment, so I'm thinking everything will be okay. They're family to us. We got to care about them when we're able to, that's all we can do.
Mm-hmm.
So beyond that, I've been doing a little bit of writing. I've been in like this meal prepping mode lately too. I've been trying to like alter my diet a little bit because I just felt like trash lately. And I'm on day 4 of the altered diet and I feel phenomenal. So
Nice.
so that's good.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So welcome everybody. It's episode 178 of Restitching the Tapestry. I know I kind of got a little ahead of myself by just talking about how we've been doing, but it is, as of our recording, Wednesday, November 20th, 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving is on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
I think Thanksgiving is going to be very interesting for a lot of American families this year, being that we are coming off an election. And our topic tonight is boundaries. So this was a topic that we were going to do next season, but because we wanted to do a spontaneous episode, we kind of like pulled into that list. So we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But before we get into the current event snapshot, should I just do the mission statement? I think I should just do that.
Yes, let's do the mission statement.
We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing.
Mm.
I feel like every time we do the mission statement now, I'm getting more and more emotional over the realization that we are so close to not being able to recite it anymore.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about that?
This is kind of one of the, usually what I do is I will like kind of internalize the mission statement, and kind of think about the topic. But this time I actually was just like watching you do the mission statement, and I was just like, wow, like, yeah, I was really appreciating just watching you do it, and um, I wasn't really thinking about the words necessarily, but just that we do this every week or every other week, or regularly. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just appreciating, you know I was just appreciating you, and I was just appreciating it, and I was appreciating like how much how much we put into this show. And you know the mission statement, it's so powerful, and it's, yeah, I was getting kind of emotional about it too. I don't know.
Oh, I appreciate you too. I kind of, I don't know, like when I was reading it, I was kind of absorbing the moment too. I also felt that way with when the introduction or when the credits were playing. I just
Oh,
I don't know, like I think the last episode I'm gonna have a really hard time getting through the mission statement. So
yeah.
um but I think it's just encouraging us to appreciate the moment, to absorb this, to appreciate all that we've done, right?
Mhm.
And I'm glad that we're taking moments these final episodes to kind of like pan out and think about that, because I feel like we owe ourselves that much,
Mhm.
like you were saying, for all that we've done. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, current event snapshot, we have quite a bit going on. The first bit of news that is kind of concerning, Ari and I were talking about this earlier today when we were messaging each other, but Ukraine has launched an attack on Russia using US made weapons.
Yeah. And Russia actually changed their nuclear charter that said, if you attack their country using weapons with, like, indirectly like that, it's like a direct attack.
Mm-hmm.
So, what the U.S. has done is, give Ukraine, um, what are they called? Landmines
Mm-hmm.
instead, to counter Russia, which is scary. It's like it feels like a very dire situation all around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how I feel about it. Um,
No
in,
either.
in total, I was telling my therapist that, um, I do like President Biden, and I do understand that he feels a lot of pressure to help Ukraine. Um, I'm wondering, and I say this nauseatingly, um, that is is there going to be peace talks with Trump? Is because I know
Mm-hmm.
that there's talk about that. That
Yeah.
is he going to work on possibly creating a more ambivalent situation when he gets into office?
Mm-hmm. I mean, all we can do is really wait, right? I
Right.
am very perplexed by the current state of events with what's been taking place over there. And I won't lie, like, I'm not a huge fan of it. I feel like with the remaining time that's left with Biden in office, like, I would appreciate if we would spend some time trying to encourage the protections of various groups of people who are going to undoubtedly be impacted by what's to come, right? So I think the fact that that really hasn't been the focus, that's along with this situation, is just really concerning to me. Um, but the truth is, like, even though we do consider ourselves liberal, we are not above criticizing the politicians that we voted for in the past, right?
Right.
Because they are not perfect. And I think they should be held accountable even for the actions or inaction that they take.
Right.
So regardless. Oh, go ahead, Ari.
I'm just concerned about, taking action when maybe it's not necessary, and but feeling that pressure to take action.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about what this means, because of the escalation.
Same. I feel like there's so much uncertainty right now, and we don't like uncertainty.
Yeah.
I know I don't. I just like, I mean, anyone affected, I just hope that everyone is going to be okay. But like, I think that that's kind of fallen by the wayside, considering also so much has been happening here too.
Mm-hmm.
So another current event is, well, Trump is currently selecting his cabinet and administrators for like his, presidency.
Yeah.
And we've been getting some very interesting selections to the point where it really feels like a reality TV show.
It just it kind you know what it kind of reminds me of? RoboCop a little bit. Have you ever watched the movie RoboCop?
Yes, I.
It kind of reminds me of that like weird reality of RoboCop a little bit.
Yeah.
Or it's sort of like, I'll buy that for $1 kind of reality,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I don't like that we're comparing our administration to RoboCop.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the name a dystopian story, There
Yeah.
we go. But
Yeah.
so like one of his newest cabinet picks is Dr. Oz.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Oz was just selected to be what is it? Secretary of basically the head of Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Oh God.
And I don't I know that people adored Dr. Oz like in the 2000s, but like obviously over the last decade, he's definitely been revealed as being like a conspiracy theorist, a health fad enthusiast. Like we could I feel like the list could go on and on.
The spreader of medical misinformation.
Yeah. Another one that was just announced was the Secretary of Education of the education sector, and that is Linda McMahon, who is the former WWE CEO.
Wait, really?
I am not kidding
You're
you.
serious.
I am 1000% serious. And we thought Betsy DeVos was concerning. Like, what is happening? What is happening? I feel like he just has like a jar of problematic people like with their names in it, and just keeps like drawing people out of it, being like, oh, this problematic person, we'll put them here.
He's just like, what celebrities can I put in to the mix that people will recognize easily?
Well, I didn't recognize her. The only one I recognized was Dr. Oz. I
I
had
know
to
who
actually
she
look
is.
up who she
I know who she is because I watched the WWE.
Oh, I don't watch the WWE.
Oh, I do. I know exactly who she is.
All right, I didn't know you watched the WWE.
I lived in Iowa. Of course I did.
Oh, that's fair, I guess. I mean, what else is there to do there?
Speaking of scripted things, I watched the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight.
Oh my god, that's a current event. Talk about that, all right. What are your thoughts?
What a time. And Netflix gaslit us all at the end by not working.
What reality are we living in? What reality are we living in?
I don't know. Was it scripted or was it real? People were saying that there were conspiracy theories that the reason why it was being put on is because the Pentagon failed its audit.
Okay. That's an interesting
But
theory.
that was the conspiracy theory that was being passed around on Facebook. That was being told to me that there was a reason why the biggest
No.
fight of the year was being passed around.
Well, and we know how to take what we see on Facebook, right?
Absolutely, as a grain of salt. However, that is a current event as well. Is they did fail their audit.
Right.
uh,
Go ahead.
but Jake Paul, I was like, okay, Jake Paul, not the greatest guy in the world. Mike
Absolutely
Tyson,
not.
also not the greatest guy in the world, fighting each other. The fights leading, because there were several fights that led up to that fight, and they got more brutal each
Mm-hmm.
time. Because there was Serrano versus Taylor too. That they had a kind of rematch fight, and that was so brutal because she had a cut on her forehead, and she was just basically like bleeding all over the place on the mat.
Oh my
And
God.
it was brutal. Like my sister and I were FaceTiming or Facebook messaging, and we just were like, this is the most brutal fight I've ever seen. Like there were two women just fighting, and they were just like beating the crap out of each other. And it was just like a very, very like horrible fight. It was a horrible fight leading up to the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight. And Mike Tyson and him didn't even fight until like midnight. Like we were up until like over midnight watching this fight. And the fight was kind of anticlimactic. Because Mike Tyson came out and he looked tired, and he looked like he was just there for the paycheck, and it was not a great fight.
Hey, if only Mike Tyson were as tired as the rest of America was over
Well,
the shenanigans.
that's the thing. People thought that the whole thing was like that it was going to be that healing event from the Trump election, and it didn't end up being that at all.
If that is the healing event, then truthfully, all hope has been lost.
It truly, truly was.
So one other current event, Speaker Mike Johnson just is in the process of seeking to institute a transgender bathroom ban in the U.S. House, in Congress, essentially, which
Not surprising.
I'm
Disappointed,
not,
but surprising.
I'm not surprised either. I think it's definitely a reflection of what they want to do the next 4 years, which is very concerning. So again, everyone, I know current events are heavy. I know that we're still very much recovering from an election, but keep in mind we still have time left until next year. My what I've been imparting to everybody is do your best to enjoy what you can for the holidays. Like just allow yourself to take a break from all the stress for the holidays. But well, sometimes you have to create a boundary for yourself from all that stress, right? You have to so
Let's just
we decided
keep going.
let's just keep going. So we decided to do the surprise episode. It's not on our list. Why did we do it? Why did we decide to do it, Ari?
I think that I wanted to do it because we had time this week, and I was excited to hang out with you, and I had the mental and emotional capacity to do it.
So we were like, bam, bam, bam. Let's get it in the books. Let's do it. And let's pull, like I said earlier, an episode that we would do if there were to be a 6th season. So, and I feel like throughout the show as a whole, we've talked about boundaries ever since the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe not like an entire episode dedicated to it, but I feel like we've touched on it here and there. So I'm pretty excited that we are just taking the time to really allocate to this topic area, because I feel like it is very applicable to the time. I feel like it's very applicable to things that we are going through. And hopefully, whatever we have to reflect on tonight, all of you will find some nugget in here to absorb and be like, oh, okay. So I guess when it comes to setting boundaries, what do we even mean when we're talking about boundaries?
Well, boundaries, the word boundary can mean so many different things, because that on a national level, boundary means something. On a personal level, between interpersonal relationships, boundary means a thing. With my personal thing, consciousness, the boundaries of consciousness mean something. So it has so many different meanings. But I think what we're talking about with boundaries, I think, is interpersonal relationships. That when we have interactions with other people and having those interpersonal interactions with other people, what it is we're trying to set up a system in which we are having, it's not rules necessarily, but having a way in which we have what is acceptable behavior that we allow for other people to interact with us.
And a lot of it also is not only acknowledging that for ourselves, but also acknowledging other people's boundaries too, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's so many different layers to it. And I mean, I've been on a very interesting journey regarding establishing boundaries. Our next question is, what has our journey been in establishing boundaries for ourselves or heeding other people's boundaries? I'm not going to lie. I really still struggle with setting boundaries for other people when it comes to so many different things. Oh my God. Emotional bandwidth, my time, ultimately, like, access to aspects of me, right? And if I were to recollect on my journey of establishing boundaries, I'm going to flat out say there was a point where I had zero boundaries. I would respect other people's boundaries, but I had zero boundaries for myself. And I think the first time I really started acknowledging that was probably in college. This has been a whole theme this season because I've been talking the whole season about what I would do in college to make myself seem appealing to other people, whether it was to fit in or to find someone or, to be in the in crowd. And part of my thinking back then was, if I did not have boundaries, then people would find me more likable and would thus allow me in, allow me to be part of the group. Right?
Yeah.
And I remember the first time, I mean, there's some really personal situations like regarding like physical relationships,
Oh,
like
yeah.
where people did not respect my boundaries and I did not uphold them. But at a certain point, I think I also did not uphold my social boundaries, So I remember I would always kind of like get coaxed into going to parties and stuff like that. And, or you know me, am I a partier?
No, we're both not partiers.
We,
Not really.
we, I remember being at this party. I'm fairly sure it was like a Gay Street Alliance party or something like that. It was a wild party. Like there were things that I saw that I never thought I'd see. And I just remember sitting there in the corner, dissociating, being like, why did I allow myself to be here?
Oh no.
And I'm just like, I was like, I couldn't leave because I didn't have my driver's license at that time, nor did I have a car. So I was depending on people driving me. So
Oh
I was
man.
just like sitting there. I was like, this sucks. I'm so uncomfortable. I don't like being here. This is way outside of my boundaries. People are being invasive. They're bothering me. What am I going to do? And at that point, at that juncture, I was like, Donny, damn it. You need to start saying no.
Yeah.
What about you? What was like boundary setting for you like?
Definitely, like in college, I definitely remember feeling that pressure to that to drink when I was young, and not having that boundary of um knowing when to stop. And I also remember feeling a lot of pressure to smoke weed. I
Mm.
remember that pressure too. Is that because I never really like would buy my own weed or any of that. It was just always like everybody else is doing it. There's that peer pressure to partake in, weed culture and to be around other people who are smoking. So I was like, I guess it's okay. Everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
I should smoke down with them too. But at a certain point, I would just start passing it because I just didn't feel good. I didn't really enjoy it. It
Mm.
wasn't enjoyable to me because I didn't like how it made me feel.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
so I just, but yeah, I think about that sometimes, that how that's affected me in the long run, as far as my mental health and what that's done to me as an adult. Um, how that's affected me because of studies I've read about what weed does to your
Mhm.
psychological development.
Yeah.
So I think about that, like what that changed in my mental physiology. Um, I'm not blaming anybody. It was my own boundary that I set for myself. But
Mhm.
um, I think about like if I hadn't, you know, said yes to those things, what would anything have been different?
Interesting. I think that's a good question to ask though. Like, I know for me, especially early on in college, my greatest weakness is I would always succumb to people painting me out like I'm a stick in the mud,
Hmm.
being like, "Oh, you're not the one drinking or smoking. Why are you even here?
Yeah.
Um, why aren't you enjoying yourself? Are you mad? Like, are you judging us for enjoying ourselves?" I was like, "No, I'm not. Like, just let me be here. Just let me exist in this space." You
Yeah.
know? And juggling that when I was in college, like it actually made me have a difficult time enjoying myself in general. Like after that, like even when I was in a festive occasion that I wanted to be in, I had a hard time enjoying it because I was so conditioned to be on guard as a result, you
Yeah.
know? Or there would be situations where I would like overperform, where I would like force myself so hard to make it seem like I'm having a fun time that it would come off as either being obnoxious or seeming like I was being artificial, right?
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Donnie.
I mean, no, it's okay. Like it's helped me develop an understanding of what I would do to fit in and to cope and to kind of like code switch. Dare we bring that up again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's funny because now that I'm in my mid 30s, I realized over the past 5 years, I've really worked to unpack that and to
Mhm,
actually break it down where, like, now I can be in spaces where other people are drinking and having fun and I can participate if I choose and not feel like this sense of guilt or shame if I'm not. Like, I
yeah,
can actually do that now
mhm.
without feeling the need to like compromise my own boundaries or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's
No,
a
it
very
does.
refreshing feeling.
Absolutely, because I can be around people who are drinking now, and there are ways in which I don't have to participate, because usually what I do is if I'm going to, because I've been to parties where people are drinking, and what I did is I brought liquid death, which is sparkling water that
Mhm.
looks like alcohol, but it's not.
Oh my god, I've done that before too. Where I've like pretended to be like, oh, oh, you know.
And before, when I was in Seattle, there was a woman who I knew from Death Valley who I would hang out with. And she said vehemently, I don't drink. And I
Mm,
thought that that was so strange at the time that she had that boundary. But
right.
looking back on it, I really respect that she had that boundary, that she was like, because she set that boundary and she kept it, and that she was very firm with it, and that she you know kept to that, and that she was able to be around people who did drink and she didn't drink herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I do think it's an act of courage to be able to establish a boundary,
Yeah.
right? And I think especially if you're in a marginalized community, or it's in like an act of courage because the dominant social powers expect things to work in their fashion that they want. So
Mm-hmm.
like if you're going against that and you're establishing a boundary, it's like
Yeah.
you're painted to be an other of sorts, right?
Yeah.
It becomes adversarial.
At the time, I just didn't understand it, because usually, like, when you meet somebody, I think it's just because I hadn't really met anybody before who didn't drink at the
Mhm,
time. And so as I've gotten older, I've met more and more people who don't drink. And so it's become part of like a normal culture for me. But
mhm,
usually, like, when you first encounter somebody who doesn't drink, it's because drinking is such a normal part of our culture.
mhm.
It's so strange, because you're just like, it is that othering thing where you're like, you don't drink. Are
What?
you okay? What? And because I, at the time, I didn't take medication, or I didn't do other things, and so it was like, it was such a strange, it was like, it was like my brain short circuited. I didn't understand. But now I'm like, oh yeah, drinking is actually kind of really bad for you, and it actually has a lot of negative health effects.
Mhm. I don't mind doing it leisurely now, but, like, now I don't feel like this pressure to overdo it, which
Yeah.
is it's kind of nice, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but, like, so obviously, we're talking about boundaries that we were encountering, or that we were, like, trying to set in college, right?
Right.
I think the other boundary has a lot to do with, like, identity and self-actualization, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, on the journeys that we've been on, being that we are part of the LGBTQ plus community, right? Like, we've had to navigate so many people trying to minimize us, erase us, harass us, name it. And one of
Invalidate.
those, yeah, invalidating us. One of the boundaries that we've had to create is like this, like, no, like, stay away from me. You're not going to do that. Like, and I think now that I've gotten older, one of the boundaries that I have has a lot to do with like politics. I wasn't exaggerating it early in the episode when I said like that this is going to be an interesting holiday season for a lot of families, because like a lot of families are going to be fragmented because of the election, and there are a lot of people who have made decisions to establish boundaries for themselves.
Speaking from personal experience, I definitely have set a boundary. Um, I don't want to get into specifics about it, but
Mhm,
I have set a boundary with some family members, not about the specific election, but just about boundaries with specific family members,
mhm,
um, because of
mhm.
invalidation of just myself in general, not necessarily about my identity, although that is part of it, but just invalidation.
Yeah.
And uh, oh, I'm getting kind of sick thinking about it, because it's so hard to talk about. Um, because
Well, we can shift to something else if you
no,
want to.
no, I want to talk about it. That's the thing. I want to talk about it because it's so important to talk about stuff like this. Um, because when people invalidate you and treat you as less than, and treat you as though you're not worthy, and make you feel as though you are not good enough,
Mhm,
especially things like with narcissism, and with being less than, and you've been treated like that for years and years and years.
mhm.
Setting that boundary is can be difficult, and sometimes setting that boundary is important. It's hard, because sometimes that includes, you know, not being around that person,
Yeah,
or moving away from that person, and that's difficult, because
yeah.
you want to keep that relationship alive, But sometimes it's very, very difficult to keep that relationship going because
Mhm.
the invalidation continues.
Yeah.
And we had a question about that. How do you set boundaries and reassert your boundaries with someone who has no boundaries, such as a narcissist? And that's something that I have struggled with for my whole life, is that, and that's why, you talked about having trouble setting boundaries with yourself and other people. And that was kind of why I was such a people pleaser for so long. I wanted to always, and why I got into relationships with abusive people and like I would always try to do this like fawning thing of like always, you know, well, it's okay. I would always say, that invalidation of myself, I would gaslight myself. Oh, it's okay. It's okay that they did that. It's okay that they did that. It's fine that they did that.
Ooh,
That they stepped over
yeah.
my boundaries again. Um, and that they left me feeling bad, and that they treated me this way because they loved me. They said they loved me, and it's all right that they abuse me because we're in a relationship. It's all right that they act one way in public and one way in private, but I know that they care about me because they did this for me.
Hmm. Wow. We go so far to justify things, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we've been made to feel minimal and to not feel like we belong, right?
Right.
Now
Mm-hmm.
that really resonates with me, and thank you for sharing it. Although I am sorry that you've had to deal with, making this decision, right, to kind of care about your own mental well-being and establish boundaries. I remember during the 2020 election, around that time, I really had to set some boundaries with family in the form of both distancing myself, but also when I started kind of reconnecting, I had to be like, we're not, we're not going there. We're not going there. And people have reactions to that, especially if they want to like try to antagonize you. Sometimes they will be narcissistic and try to like guilt you. Other times they will um dismiss you as being over dramatic. And the reason why for me in like family conversations I just don't really talk about like politics anymore is because I've oftentimes had it thrown in my face like I'm the one being over dramatic or I'm the one being unhinged when I'm literally just sitting and having a conversation like this, presenting evidence, reliable sources, etc. And when people don't know how to respond, their immediate go-to is to try to attack your demeanor or your character or your identity,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the politics that you talk about are the politics of your existence. I mean, that's kind of difficult to disentangle.
Mm-hmm.
That they affect your very livelihood
Mm-hmm.
and the very nature of what it means to be you.
Yeah. Well, like with regard to identity, like I mean, like what you were just talking about a few minutes ago, like having someone invalidate identity, like that is probably a breach of one of the biggest boundaries that we create, and that's the parameters we set for ourselves in this existence,
Yeah.
right? And when somebody is willing to step over that, like what message does that send? Now, I've given a lot of thought about that since the pandemic and since the 2020 election. I attribute therapy as being very helpful with that because
Mhm.
it's kind of helped me see how I've allowed people and how far I've allowed them to go when it comes to treating me the way they treat me. And the fact that I would go that long without even saying anything.
Yeah.
I would just be like, oh, yeah, yeah. That's just them being them.
Yeah. I said it all the way up until because this hospital visit really changed the CBT therapy that I did,
Hmm.
where I was doing in partial therapy, really changed the way that I saw a lot of things because we talked about boundaries in that therapy. We
Hmm.
talked about narcissism in that therapy. And I started reading a book. I don't have it in front of me immediately, but it's called It's Not You, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. I actually bought
Oh,
it. It's at Target. but I bought it. And I think the person who wrote it, I've seen her on YouTube. It's Dr. Ramani.
Okay.
But she talks about a lot of like the way that narcissists work and how you can heal from that abuse. And I've had my sister tell me, and I've had my therapist tell me, because I was reading it and I was like, maybe I'm the narcissist. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And I was like thinking about it and I was stressing about it. And I was like, maybe there's something wrong with me. And my therapist was like, usually if you're the one thinking that you're the problem, it's probably not you. And I was like, but so I was like going through that because I've taken tests before, because sometimes I stress about it. I'm like, am I a narcissist? Is there something wrong with me? Am I a bad person? And so I've taken tests after test after test of like, am I a narcissist? Is there something wrong with me? Because I've had ex-boyfriends like accuse me of being a narcissist and being like an abuser and being like a bad person. And like I was like, I've been accused of having BPD. I've been accused of having narcissism. I've been accused of having all sorts of things before by exes.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I've taken tests and I've asked doctors and I've done all sorts of things. And the only thing that I have is bipolar disorder.
I was chuckling earlier because, as you know, I 3000% resonate with that, because that's literally what I've asked my own therapist before, being like, am I having issues with friendships or relationships because I'm the narcissistic one? And my therapist flat out was like, if you can ask yourself that question, then no. Because a narcissist will never admit that they're flawed or that they're wrong. Bam. Yep. So, mind blown, right? No.
And that's so crazy to me to think about, like that they don't ask that question. That's not something that occurs to them.
Mm-hmm. It's otherworldly, kind of. I mean, to me, it seems otherworldly because for us, it's so far outside of like our self-awareness, you know? I do think that narcissists are inherently not self-aware. Like I mean, at the end of the day, anything they do is to glorify themselves and their image and their power, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it seems so outside of reality to be a narcissist. But see, at a time like when you're being manipulated by one, you can kind of be made to feel like, oh, like it gets twisted, right? Like it kind of gets redirected to make it seem like you're the one who's being the problem, right?
Well, and because I have delusional disorder, reality is always a little weird anyway. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
like I always think like maybe it's a movie that I'm in, or maybe it's my reality is not quite real, or like, maybe what I'm experiencing is not actually happening.
Mm-hmm. And for me, I'm always like, what am I internally projecting on the world around me that's kind of making it seem altered to me, right?
Right, exactly.
And because the truth is, like, people do project. Like, we do project. I think everybody to a certain extent projects.
Mm-hmm.
But for many of us, especially those of us who do have bipolar disorder, like we tend to project more, or like worry about like what we're projecting more. But it's
or
interesting.
the or the
Oh, go ahead.
state of like our emotions and how they affect, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because the way that bipolar dysregulates emotions and how
Mm-hmm.
that affects relationships, yeah.
Right. Well, because I think a lot of people kind of make it cookie cutter, like, oh, here is how you regulate emotions. 2 + 2 is 4.
Yeah.
And for many of us, that's not the case, right?
Mhm.
Like, there's a lot more to regulating emotions. Um, but so like, okay, where were we at in the questions? I think I lost myself. Is it possible to have a relationship with somebody who does not know what boundaries are? Does it make it difficult to interact with people like that? What about in a work setting? Ooh. That's an interesting question. How do you maintain boundaries and reassert them?
I've had so many work settings that didn't understand setting up personal boundaries, that they're like, where they'll schedule you hours and they'll just, have you ever done clopens?
Mm-mm.
Where you
Oh, close
close
and opens? Oh, yes, I have
and
done
open,
that.
and they don't understand your personal boundaries of, I need a certain number of hours of sleep. I need a certain number of hours. Like, I can only work a certain number of hours per week. Like, that's just a regular, like, boundary setting of, I have needs as a human being, and that I need to live a life that is, like, I understand making money, and I understand that I need to make money to live. I need to make money to support myself, but also I need to support myself in an emotional and self-care way, that I need to set this boundary that I cannot work over a certain number of hours, because it is imperative to my mental and physical health that I cannot work more than a certain number of hours.
Yeah. Now, I think like that, I think in the workplace, that's where a lot of people often shed their boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, that capitalistic assembly line conditions us to think that, like there's nothing else that's more a priority
Right.
than the output, right? Like I definitely resonate with that when it comes to boundaries in the workplace. I think one thing that I've learned, and this is largely in academia, that I never encountered in any other workplace, is that like in academia, if you're faculty, you definitely manage your own time more so than in other workplaces. And you are basically in charge with like all the different things that you take on, like all the different responsibilities. And there's like this expectation to can continue building and building and building these responsibilities to the point where you don't really create a threshold for yourself of like, okay, what is too much? Like,
Right.
what is that breaking point for you? And I know during the pandemic for me, I realized that breaking point because I never would say no to people. No, I think, is the most straightforward boundary that you can create for yourself.
I know you would tell me things like, I'm doing I'm doing all of these like projects, and I'm like, do you have time for yourself? Like,
And I'd be like, what? What's that?
and I understand that it's because you wanted to be helpful and you wanted to be that go-getter. But also, you know, there's a limitation to what you could possibly do.
Mm-hmm. Well, the huge manic episode I had in fall of 2020, that was the catalyst that made me realize like I am fraying my thresholds
Mhm.
by not respecting the boundaries that I've set for myself. Actually, no, I'm fraying my thresholds because I just have not ever set boundaries. Like I'm just a kite in the wind when it comes to boundaries.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, but like now that I've built that experience, and I'm like, okay, now it's a little bit easier to say no. It's a little bit easier to, heed my bandwidth. I mean, when you think about the trajectory of our show, right? Like the fact that we've decided to end it with this season, like that was kind of in a way us acknowledging bandwidth and establishing that like, like, hey, I do have a threshold and it's okay to acknowledge that threshold,
Mhm.
right?
Well, and even doing the pre-recording is setting a boundary that we can't do it in the live setting anymore.
Yeah. And I think that we've seen the benefits of that. I think we've felt the benefits of setting that boundary for ourselves because I feel like it's made us more comfortable, you
Yeah,
know.
I appreciate. I actually like doing the pre-recorded better than the live, because I feel like it's well, because I like coming back later and doing, where we can watch the show and chat with people and kind of comment on what we. It's like recursion.
And we're still getting that. We're still providing and receiving that engagement, but we're not under the pressure of having to react and respond in real time. Which I think that's just part of that was part of the challenge, right?
Right.
So, I guess, like, when it comes to establishing boundaries, like, I guess for me, like I mentioned, saying no, that's probably like the biggest thing. Here's a question. What are some of your non-negotiables when it comes to boundaries? What are things that you expect out of people around you? Do you have different boundaries for people that are close to you as opposed to people who are acquaintances?
So some of my non-negotiables when it comes to boundaries, I would say are, I like having space around me. I don't like when people get, especially like with people I don't know, I don't like when people get too close to me. That makes me
Mm-hmm.
feel uncomfortable. That's a boundary for me. I don't like when people get in my bubble or get in my
Mm-hmm.
space if I don't know them. I don't like when people touch me that I don't know, because that is a breach of my personal space. And I just don't. If I don't know you, if we haven't established a relationship or trust in our relationship, I just don't like when people touch me. Um, I might let a doctor touch me. I might let a nurse touch me. I might let some kind of professional touch me in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But usually I feel very uncomfortable when a stranger touches me
Mm-hmm.
or reaches out, and or if somebody asks, can I hug you or can I touch you, or like that's a different case. But if somebody just like reaches out and grabs me or like touches me, that's like very uncomfortable to me. That's like a non-negotiable to me, that like, hey, like you need to back up, you need to not touch me.
Right. Yeah. No, I think those are some important non-negotiables. For me, most of my non-negotiables have everything to do with my own bandwidth and time. Like, I know over the past few years, like I feel like a lot of people have just kind of felt like they have had ownership over my time, and if I didn't like allocate the time that they would want, they would kind of shame me for it
Mhm.
when maybe I didn't have the output or bandwidth to do so. Um, and that was a big thing for me for a while, because now I'm a little bit more regimented and like, okay, my time. What do I do with my time?
Can I just say, between you and me, Donnie, I text you all day long, and if you want to completely ignore my
Oh
text
God,
messages,
no.
please do, because I know that I am,
Ari,
and
I am the
this
one
is me
texting
respecting
you all day
this is
long.
this is me respecting your boundary. You feel free to ignore my text messages. I am okay. Like, I will not get upset if you do not respond to my text messages. And I try not to text you after like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, because I know you're probably going to bed at that point.
Ari, you can text me whenever the hell you want. I
No,
no like
no.
no like so when it comes to like conversation like this or like texting, doesn't bother me.
Okay.
I'm mostly talking about like in-person time for
Okay.
people. Now, like, I feel the same way though, because I'm always like blowing you up. I'm always like, Ari, oh my God, Ari, this link, Ari, this video. Oh my God, Ari, how do you feel?
I
Blah, blah, blah.
love I love getting text messages from you. You can pull up my phone anytime. The only
Well,
thing is that if you text me after about like 9:30, 10:30, and I don't respond, it's probably because I'm asleep.
well, and the thing is, like, I'm not gonna like freak out and be like, oh my God, Ari, do you hate me? Like, I'm not gonna do.
Oh
When I was in
no.
college and very insecure with myself,
Yeah.
and not respecting other people's boundaries or establishing my own, that's when I would have probably done something.
Yeah. But if you said, do I hate you, I would respond back, no, with a sad face and be like, do you hate me?
We're so synced up when it comes to our insecurities. God. Oh, we gotta love it though. I think my other non-negotiable probably has to do with creative output too. Like,
Yeah.
I think ever since, I mean, now that I've like developed a career as a writer, I'm always like having people send me like, can you edit this? Can you do that? Can you do this? And I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry. No, like there are often times where I will say yes, and there are often times where I will be like give me a window of time, or I can only do this at this point. I've gotten better with communicating. I think that's an important part of boundaries, is being able to communicate your boundaries with people.
Yeah.
Because if you don't communicate your boundaries with people, then you get a lot of misinterpretation, and then people inadvertently they either get hurt by your lack of communication, or you yourself get hurt because somebody might take that and run with it and be retaliatory,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Well,
um
if you don't communicate your boundaries, I mean, people aren't mind readers, so they don't know what your boundaries are if you don't tell
yeah,
them.
yeah, we're human. Like, you have to
Mhm.
be able to communicate those boundaries. Now, obviously, our hope is that those people will respect the boundaries once they are communicated,
Well, that's
right?
that's the whole point of, yeah, I hope so.
If they don't, then that begs the question of like, should we have that person in our lives?
Exactly, exactly.
Bam, bam. So I guess so our final question, we're getting close to wrapping up here. What are things that you do that respect other people's boundaries and make yourself a person that is a safe person to be around?
Well, I just did it. I said, Donnie, please let me respect your boundaries. I want to make sure that I'm respecting boundaries properly. But I also, like I said, especially when it comes, because I feel like texting is such a boundary thing. Like, and,
Mhm,
and that's such an easy boundary to break, because texting, cell phones are so in our faces all the time. You think
mhm,
about it. And one thing I do to try to respect people's boundaries is, um, I try to set a limit of when to stop texting people, because people, you can text people up until the time they pass out and fall asleep, and
mhm,
like you could be texting people. Like, I do not text people after. I try not to text people after like 10:30 or like 9:30, 10 o'clock, when I go to, like, because that's when I go to bed. But like, maybe like even after 8:30, like sometimes I don't even try. I'm trying to establish that boundary of like, I put my cell phone down, I don't text people, I try
mhm.
not to text after that time. Like, that's the boundary I'm trying to set with myself, and like trying to establish for myself, is just not text people after a certain hour, at night, um, because texting too late, you text somebody like too late, like, ugh, it's so annoying. Because I woke up in the middle of the night and somebody had messaged me at like, on Tinder at like 11:30, and I had messaged back at like, I woke up and I sent a message at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, there's no way she's gonna see this. I'm like, I hope she did not get a notification at like 3 o'clock in the morning that I had sent her a message. I
Oh
really
no,
hope
we
she
don't
didn't
think
get
about that sometimes, do we?
I didn't think about it, but I was like, I really hope that she didn't get a notification, that she had her notifications turned off. But I was like, I really hope I did not wake her up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
No. No,
But
like,
you think about that. Yeah.
yeah, I resonate with that too, because I know for me, this is largely, especially when I was in like college, in my 20s, late 20s, I would get really insecure when people would not respond immediately,
Hmm.
or if they would leave me unread. Oh God, that would play with my brain. I'd be
Yeah.
like, they hate me. Oh my God. Ah, ah. And then I'd have to be like, Donnie, create the boundary with you in yourself of the realization that you don't have ownership of other people's time. And I think technology kind of conditions us that, we have constant access to other people, so we own their time. We don't, right?
Well, and they could be sleeping, they could be eating, they could be away from their phone, they could be, and like, especially like with you, like, you don't respond to text messages right away because you're teaching, or you're doing stuff during the day. You,
Mhm.
you could be driving, you could be anything. And
Right, right.
you think about with other people too, like, you think, I'm doing those things, what could they possibly be doing at that point?
Hmm. Well, and I think part of establishing that boundary is realizing that, like, hey, I am also fully capable of communicating, like, hey, I'm going to be busy from this time to this time, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. Like, I think
Yeah.
I'm only that level of communicative with, like, the people closest to me, like you, like my fiance, like, certain family members. I'll be like, hey, busy at this time, can't, I'll respond when I'm able to.
Don't you wish there were automated text messages that could just, like, send out to people,
Like,
like,
like an
"Hey, I'm
out of
busy?"
office.
Yeah, like, don't you wish we could have, like, AIM status messages that say, "Hey, I'm busy right now"?
Oh my God, I miss AIM.
'Cause don't you wish that we could just have, like, little status messages on our that say, like, "Hey, I'm busy right now, I'm doing this right now," and so people won't message you?
It was either those or really sad lyrics I would put in my status.
But I loved that because then people would either know to message you or know not to message you.
Oh my God, I do miss that. And you would think that, like, that would have been one thing that would stay from, like, those IM days. Like, because those are Microsoft Outlook, Google, like Gmail has out, like, most emails have out of office messages. Why can't we have that for messaging?
Dear,
Like,
dear Facebook, make it so that we can. I guess they do kind of have that where you can post like a status on your messenger, but it's not the same as like an AIM
no.
messenger. It's not the same.
So I guess another thing that I do to respect other people's boundaries and make myself a safe person is I ask them. Like, I don't think we should have shame in asking people. Like, I will give you an example. Like, I am a very huggy person. You're like, oh God, I know, Donnie, you're a
No,
huggy person.
Donnie, I love you being a huggy person.
But like,
But you're close to me. I love being that love that you're huggy.
well, like, there was one time I hugged somebody and they were like, oh, and I remember being like, oh no. I was like, oh no. And now that I learned that, I can be like, I can ask people like, hey, are you comfortable with a hug? Or, sometimes I don't even ask because, like, I don't always assume everybody always wants a hug. I am a human teddy bear. Like, I'm a human cat. I want cuddles, pets, scritches, like all of it.
Yeah,
That sounded very odd, but hey.
I love that. I think it's just because I came from a cold family, so my family didn't do hugs when I was growing up. And
Mm-hmm.
so when it comes it's like only like people who you were close to you would hug, and even then, like, I have siblings who still like are very cold about hugs. Like
Mm-hmm.
they just are not huggy people, and they just like they'll do the hug, they'll do the pat pat pat, and they're really bad. They're bad
Oh,
huggers.
not the pat, pat, pat.
I know. They're just kind of like the lean over and the
Yeah. No,
but
yeah, that happens.
um I think about people like, who was a really good hugger is Lisa. Lisa was a good
Oh
hugger.
my God. 1000%. 1000%. I
I should
fondly
message
remember those
Lisa.
times.
I was thinking about her recently. I was
Yeah. I, the college days are often days I reminisce.
yeah.
But then I remember those are days where I did not have boundaries. And then I think about, like, how much stress did I cause myself by not having boundaries during the college days?
Yeah, that's true.
Uh, well, Ari, what are your parting words for the night?
Um Self-care, learn your boundaries because you know when your boundaries have been crossed if you get angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So learn what your boundaries are and communicate those to other people in a way where you can effectively uh, use those boundaries and set those boundaries and assert those boundaries in a way that you don't have to be angry.
Bam. And always respect other people's and ask about them if you're unsure,
Right.
right? My friends, it's been great again. We love you all. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all of that jazz. And we will see you on the next one. Love you. Mwah!